Oblivion is back, which means the custom spells feature is also back.
The default spells that you can buy from vendors around Cyrodiil are decent and all have their role, but they can't match the freedom, creativity, and power of custom spells. Having just finished multiple Baldur's Gate 3 playthroughs, as well as having an ongoing tabletop campaign, I was really starting to miss some of the spells from D&D that I'd gotten used to and become a fan of. That's why I've had to play around with the spell effects and game mechanics to bring you a suite of D&D spells in Oblivion. Some are quite faithful recreations, some are slightly more powerful to stay useful in the context of this game, and others are as close as I could get within the limitations. But all of them bring the flavour of D&D and some fan favourites from that world into this one. I want to be respectful of your time, so feel free to check out the series of shorts I've posted which will give you the TLDR on each spell. The spell effects and magicka costs you'll see are representative of having 100 skill in each school of magic. Spell costs start to come down rapidly as you reach 100, so do stick with it. Many of these spells can still be replicated at lower levels though, just by reducing the magnitude or duration of the effects. There are plenty of spells to get through, so let's dive in. First up is Entangle. This is one of my favourite crowd control options and a staple for druid-like characters. The aim here is to slow and trap enemies from moving freely. In D&D, this creates difficult ground, reducing speed by half. More interestingly though is the chance to root and restrain them, essentially trapping them in place. This is the powerful part we can replicate in Oblivion, and we do this by attacking their fatigue. In a 15-foot area for 10 seconds, we're going to drain fatigue for 100 points. What this means is essentially their maximum fatigue suddenly drops for the duration. Functionally, it's similar to doing 100 immediate damage to their fatigue, but only temporarily, and it'll be given back when the timer is up. We then do 50 points of fatigue damage every second for the next 10 seconds. So in a matter of moments, they are suddenly losing a ton of fatigue, and when they hit 0 fatigue, they fall over. This triggers a regen boost to their fatigue, but they'll soon take the next hit from the spell, eating the fatigue that they just regened and dropping them once again. Depending on the enemy, most will almost immediately drop to the floor. They'll then waste time getting up and will likely fall a few more times in the duration, especially if they try to spend their fatigue by attacking, jumping, or sprinting. This definitely offers the flavour of them getting snagged and restrained, especially with the greenish glow. It's great when you're jumped by a group and need to buy some time to take them out. And this isn't only effective against melee opponents, even ranged enemies or spellcasters will drop to the floor and spend time getting back up. Next is Faerie Fire, a great debuff that in D&D would normally light enemies up so they can't hide, but more importantly makes hitting them easier. Since Oblivion doesn't have hit chances, sorry not sorry Morrowind, and is just reliant on your aim, you could argue that Paralyze would make them easier to hit and emulate advantage. Paralyze doesn't feel like it fits the flavour of the spell though. It's not crowd control, it's a damage boost. And that's essentially what Advantage is. When people do the maths on damage per round, Advantage directly relates to more damage. So we're porting it into Oblivion as a big AoE debuff. In a 15-foot area for 10 seconds, we're going to apply 100% weakness to magic, 100% weakness to shock, and light them up so they're easier to track in dark places. Feel free to swap the shock weakness with fire or frost, whichever your most used element is. I like to stick to shock since it has the fastest moving projectile and is the least resisted element. Having damage spells that stick to one element means they can all make use of this debuff too. If you like to play on expert difficulty like I do, or even master, this can help against enemies who would otherwise take a ridiculous amount of spells to kill, without having to resort to full-on weakness stacking cheesiness. Now on to Heat Metal. In D&D, this is a single target debuff and minor damage spell that attacks the weapons and armor of enemies. The fire damage is usually just a bonus, the real power comes from disarming enemies. So we're starting off with 10 points of fire damage on target for 4 seconds, then maximum disintegrate weapon and disintegrate armor for 1 second. The reason we're only disintegrating for a second is because for some reason it's only the first instance of damage that actually affects item durability. The next few ticks of a longer duration don't actually apply any durability damage. What this means is that just like the D&D version, we can and should reapply the effect. This is also why we added weakness to magic, which will amplify subsequent casts, making the amount of disintegrate damage higher each time. Once their weapon is broken, most enemies just stand around. Because we're also damaging their armor pieces, this is useful for a Spellblade who will follow up with melee attacks, doing extra damage due to their lower armor rating. Finally, item durability is unaffected by difficulty setting. So even on Expert or Master, a few casts will still render the opponent totally harmless, probably much quicker than trying to chew through all that health. Next is a classic, Magic Missile. In D&D, this shoots out multiple small homing projectiles. This means our goal is to shoot out a multi-hit ranged attack with consistent and reliable damage. On target, we'll be using 40 points of damage health. This meets our goal of a reliable damage type. Like force damage in D&D, direct damage to health ignores any elemental resistance like fire or frost. Next is 40 points of weakness to magic. This encourages repeatedly sending out the spell, as the follow-up hits will take advantage of the weakness for extra damage and also apply a slightly stronger debuff for the next one. And finally, Paralyze for 1 second. Magic Missile famously doesn't miss. The best we can do to replicate this is to lock our enemies in place, making follow-up hits almost unmissable. This results in a cheap and spammable damage spell that can reliably hit and hurt any enemy. Windwalk now, similar to the Gaseous Form spell in D&D, but with a more appealing name. This turns people into balls of mist, making them incredibly fast, maneuverable, and resistant to damage. In Oblivion, we can't actually transform ourselves, but we can at least create the illusion of that while also getting the benefits of becoming air. On Self for 15 seconds, we're going to have Invisibility, which will ensure enemies can't attack or aggro us. Maximum Fortify Athletics, Acrobatics, and Speed, as well as Feather, so we're moving as fast as possible no matter what we're carrying. Finally, Light on Self, to really sell the illusion that we're just a ball of light gliding through the air. This is an incredibly useful mobility spell for getting around difficult terrain or just getting around the landscape more quickly and taking less fall damage due to max acrobatics. It also works as an escape from enemies mid-combat as we disappear in a puff of smoke. Another crowd control spell now in Confusion. This will distract a group of enemies so they stand still or wander aimlessly, just like in D&D. In a 15-foot area for 15 seconds, we're going to drain speed by 100 points. Due to a weird quirk, NPC detection range is linked to their speed. What this means is, with essentially zero detection range, enemies will stop being hostile and just wander around aimlessly or stand still. You can even continue hitting them. I played around with the Calm and Frenzy effects to emulate Confusion, but I found this to be more reliable and more representative. Best of all, because it doesn't care about target level, unlike Calm or Frenzy, you don't need to worry about enemies being too high level to be affected. Now for Shadowblade. This spell causes you to manifest a blade from thin air to make deadly melee attacks with. We're using Bound Dagger. We would use Bound Short Sword, but for some reason there isn't one in Oblivion, so Bound Dagger for 20 seconds. Then we need to maximize our damage output with it. Fortify Blade has the most direct impact on our damage here. Fortify Agility can also be boosted for a bit of extra damage. Agility, of course, being the stat that daggers and short swords key off of in the remaster, instead of Strength, which boosts other melee weapons. This is a somewhat niche spell, but can come up. A martial character will probably already be using an enchanted weapon, and because bound weapons don't come with any enchantments, other weapons will do more damage. However, if you're a full caster that has low blade skills and you don't carry around a good weapon, this is an incredibly useful spell in case you come up against an enemy with high spell reflect. I've died a few times to having my own lightning bolt immediately kill me. It would also be a resource-light way of dispatching multiple weak enemies, like slashing your way through a cave of rats. And finally for today, Thunderwave. In D&D, this is a short-range AoE spell that does a bit of damage, but is mainly used for the effect of pushing enemies away. Unfortunately, this effect isn't in the base game for us to manipulate, so it's another spell that's more of a useful illusion than a direct analog of the spell. To get this effect, we're using Demoralize on touch in a 10-foot area, so enemies in front of us or nearby run away. To speed them up as they go and give the illusion of a forceful push, we're fortifying their speed and giving them feather so they'll consistently be pushed a good distance even if they have a bunch of equipment they're carrying. The 2-second duration might sound short, but in practice it does push them quite far, and any longer and it breaks the illusion of a push and looks more like a fear effect. This is sometimes the case for small creatures like clan fears that already move really quickly. You could add some shock effect so it does some damage like the D&D version, but that's usually the least important part of the spell, and this way keeps it cheaper. It's a good panic button to have on your hotbar, buying you time if you suddenly get jumped, so you can either turn and run or draw your weapon and set up the kill. I hope you enjoyed these spell recreations. There's more to come, so please do hit subscribe so you can more easily find my future videos. See you on the next one.